Chapter 10. The Violinist. Amelia re-emerged from the bathroom a moment later, one towel wrapped around her chest and another around her shoulders. She leaned against the doorway of the kitchen as she vigorously dried her hair with the second towel, eyes watching Sherlock as he played his violin in the living room. He danced slightly as he played, feet shuffling, head nodding along, and the distinctive pattern of a three-step waltz starting to show. She made no move to alert him of her presence, instead choosing to watch him silently, trying to observe the enigma wrapped in a riddle that made up Sherlock Holmes. No, that doesn't sound right, he said to himself as he scribbled out one of the notes he'd written down on his sheet paper, then replacing it with another. Sherlock's tongue stuck out between his teeth as he thought for a moment. Then he scrambled to set down his pencil and tried playing the piece again. Then Sherlock blew out a breath and started the song from the beginning. It had been ages since Amelia had heard such a proficient violinist, and she watched, enraptured as Sherlock's fingers danced over the fine instrument. He barely glanced at his sheet music, playing it all by memory. His sharp chin dug into the chin rest as he clung onto the instrument, tightly, as if it was his lifeline, as if he would drift out to the sea without it. Sherlock let out an almost forlorn-sounding sigh as he lowered the instruments, notes echoing in the silence before fading into oblivion. Despite how impressed she was by Sherlock's violin playing, Amelia did not clap. Instead, calmly raised an eyebrow and spoke aloud. "There once was a man who played a song sweet and fine," she said, Sherlock spinning around to look at her. He gazed upon the world with eyes so clear and bright. He had so much to say, but spoke so little, so he took refuge in music, playing his sorrows away. 'Twas the reason no one heard him play, for it wasn't just a song that filled the hollow space. It was the words unspoken that needed to be heard. It was the silence unbroken in this empty world. He played no simple song, for in fact, it was his heart he was giving away. Sherlock set down his violin on the desk. "Who's that by?" "Yours truly," Amelia said. "It's about you, in case you didn't get that." "I did, indeed. I'm glad." With those words, the conversation seemed to falter and die, until both of them were left standing, one with rosin still clinging to his fingers, which had somehow managed to smear across one cheek, the other wearing naught but a few scraps of terry cloth wrapped around her body. And John still hadn't returned home. "Why are you writing poetry about me?" Sherlock inquired suddenly. "You seem to be awfully interested in me, Miss Watson." "I could say the same thing." Amelia jerked her head towards Sherlock's music. "Outlawries. Really? You just took various letters of my full name and tried to see what words you could compose of them. Clever idea, as it really is a rather vague word. Outlawries is seldomly used anymore." Sherlock raised an eyebrow. "Care to explain?" "Oh, you don't like it when the tables are turned, do you, Sherlock?" Amelia said, more for her sake than his. She cleared her throat. "Very well. As I said, outlawries is seldom used anymore, and although you are a rather peculiar fellow, I imagine that you would have put some thought into naming such a piece. I saw ink stains on your fingers, and you were clearly writing your notes in pencil, but the title of the song is also in ink. The ink stains are a day or two old, I'd imagine, given the darkness or lack thereof of the stains. Now comparing that to the fact that I overheard you talking with John about my full name, then I caught you scribbling it down on a piece of paper and worrying over it with a pen to your mouth as you circled various letters. Therefore, it had to do with my name. I compared the name of the song with my name and found that 10 letters out of the 17 matched. Now, that's only 58.8% in common, but I'd hardly think that you're the one to title your songs without some sort of meaning. Don't get me wrong, I really am flattered," Amelia finished with a small smirk on her blood-red lips. "Am I wrong?" "No. Impressive that you managed to get all that. 3 days of observation, and many months of training from your brother. Mycroft, of course." "Naturally." "Naturally," Sherlock repeated. "I imagine, then, that you attempted to deduce the entirety of my life story when we first met." "No, I already knew enough about you from John and Mycroft. I'd be prejudiced." "Good reasoning. Thank you. You are missing something rather large, Miss Watson. Pray tell?" "You're avoiding the question. Perhaps you should get dressed, and we can discuss over a cup of tea why you are writing poetry about me," Sherlock said, turning back to his music and shooting her off with a wave of his hand. "Why are you wearing my shirt?" Sherlock asked as Amelia emerged from the bedroom, buttoning up a purple button-up shirt. Sherlock's purple button-up shirt. She paid him no attention, setting the kettle on. "Amelia?" "Sherlock," she mocked him, one eyebrow raised. Amelia cleared her throat, leaning against the countertop and looking down at her hands. "Right, the poetry. You're an interesting subject, Sherlock Holmes. I could not help but want to write poetry about you." See, everyone's got a pressure point. John being his, or rather our family, Mrs. Hudson with her drugs, your brother with you, and myself with my past. But you have two rather large ones. John, naturally, in your fundamental lack of understanding about basic human nature. Sentiment, reckoning, reasoning, morals, and things such as the like. John knows how to save a life, but I have a rather different skill set. I may not understand their logic, but I can read a person just as easily as you can read a crime scene. Yet, you're rather odd. Sociopaths and psychopaths, for that matter, are certain exclusions to my abilities. Some days I can see exactly what's going through your head, and other days you do something so out of character. I can hardly believe you're the same person. You can trust psychopaths to always choose the most destructive out of the two paths. They do enjoy their games, but with sociopaths, I found they adapt to their surroundings, becoming what they need to be for necessity. You don't comply with either scenario. Certainly, you don't care about what society thinks of you, and despite the occasional outbursts, you function as a slightly odd but sane human being. That's why I wrote poetry about you. The Enigma Sherlock Holmes could be the title of your memoir. Sherlock pursed his lips. Are you accusing me of being changeable? How hypocritical. I'm not denying the fact that I do the same. It was merely on observation, an answer as to why you're suddenly become my muse. Excuse my pun, but how very poetic is that? There's hardly a crying need for poetry. It really isn't something that one has to write. Nor is there a crying need for bookkeeping. Yet I've caught you reading a book on it more than once, she snapped defensively. Sherlock's mouths curled in at the ends. Oh, I do like you, Miss Watson. Can't say the same. You're rather irritating. You enjoyed it. No, you're really quite aggravating. Definitely enjoy it. If I say that I don't, you'll keep pressuring me until I say that I do. And once I do that, you'll tell John, and the pair of you will tease me until the end of days. Amelia set about making 2 cups of tea, taking 2 chipped mugs out of the cupboard and setting them on the counter. So, if you don't mind, I think I'll choose to stay silent. I'll get you to admit it eventually. I hardly think so. I am training in resisting interrogation techniques, Holmes, she said nonchalantly, as if she were speaking about the weather. She still didn't look back at the detective, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter, and she stared down at the sink. Yet, it seems you can get me to talk. Not about the things I want you to talk about. Nevertheless, it's an impressive start. Amelia blew out a breath, and at long last turned to face Sherlock. Why am I still here? You've got quite a reputation for disliking people. Yet, if I recall correctly, you'd want me to stay more than John did. You're clever. Hardly. You're far more clever than most people. As if that's difficult. True. Sherlock stapled his fingers, chewing the inside of his lip. How would he describe his thoughts towards Amelia? She was a light in the darkness, but not in the typical sense. She was an inferno that burned everything in her path, reducing it to rubble and ash. Amelia Laura Watson was a force of destruction, not of creation, and somehow that made her all the more beautiful. But Sherlock couldn't very well say that, now could he? You're interesting, Sherlock finally said, and let me guess, you're fond of interesting? How might you have come about that conclusion? Sherlock didn't deny her question, instead deflecting it with another. With ease. As I said, interesting. Ah, well, to each their own. I hardly think that I'm the first man or woman for that matter, to find you interesting. Women more than men. Naturally. Naturally, Amelia drawled almost sarcastically. She placed her hands on her hips. The muscle in her jaw twitching as she glared at Sherlock. You know, you're not half as bad as your brother makes you to be. And you're not nearly as average as you make yourself to be. Flattery will get you nowhere, Sherlock Holmes. Not with me, at least. Flattery, I've found, will get you everywhere in this world. Then believe you found an exception. Sherlock snorted. It would appear so.
I like trains.
What does trains have to do with Sherlock?
don't know what you're talking about.
You just came in and said I like trains in the middle of recording.
Reading.
You know, I think I want coffee, Amelia said, frowning down at the 2 cups of tea she's made. How do you want it? I'll order it up from the cafe, Sherlock offered, his head slightly tilted to the side as he frowned down at his newspaper. Black, Amelia responded, collapsing on her seat, like my soul. Sherlock chuckled, following silence as John yelled out, Amelia Laura Watson, what the hell do you think you're doing? Amelia leapt to her feet, flashing a smile to Sherlock. And that, I'm afraid, is my cue. Good night, Mr. Holmes. Amelia shut the bedroom door just as John came barging into 221B. One Watson replaced with another. There was a certain symmetry about it that Sherlock appreciated. Amelia, get back here, or I swear to God I'll call her mother and tell her what you did, John snarled. Don't you dare, Amelia shouted through the door. John drove for the landline, but Sherlock pulled it out of reach just in time, holding it above his head. I assure you that I had equal blame in her escape. Amelia opened the bedroom door, peering out with wide eyes. Surprise! Not cool! Amelia opened the bedroom door, peering out with wide eyes, surprised that Sherlock would take her side in anything. Though that might have to do with earlier, she thought, a small smile creeping its way onto her lips. Jesus Christ, said John, running a hand through his hair. I get you two are basically a couple now, but she's my sister, Sherlock. But do you always have to take her side? And Amelia ended her futile protest with a loud shout, then slammed the door shut once again, shaking the walls. I'm surprised she hasn't kissed you yet, John remarked flippantly, sitting down in his seat and leafing through a magazine. She's a bit rash when it comes to people, she fancies, John shrugged. But that's Amelia for you. Sherlock glared at him, picking up his violin and playing a high-pitched four-note melody repeatedly, the screeching noise irritating John. John grimaced and placed his hands over his ears. Sherlock, can you be a little less annoying? Sherlock arched his eyebrow and simply said, No. Chapter 11. Every genius needs an audience. Amelia sat in Lestrade's office, her feet on the DA's desk, despite the glares that he gave her. Amelia crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes shut. She had barely gotten any sleep the night before, her mind churning with the thoughts of Moriarty and Sherlock. Amelia yawned, covering her mouth with her hand. She looked to John, who sat beside her, then lowered to her feet, and leaned onto the table. So, whatever happened to that woman on the phone? Why are you here again? Lestrade asked. Amelia smiled in response. I'm a genius. I need an audience, she shrugged. I go back to my first point. What happened to the woman? She lives in Cornwall, Lestrade answered. 2 men broke in wearing masks, forced her to drive to the car park, and decked her out in enough explosives to take down a house. He glanced up at Sherlock, who towered over Lestrade due to Sherlock's impossible tall height. Told her to phone you. She had to read out from this pager. He placed a simple pager before Amelia, who immediately picked it up and started examining it. And if she deviated by one word, the sniper would set her off, Amelia said as she tilted her head to the side, impressive by simple ingenuity of the idea. Or, if he hadn't solved the case, John said, looking to Sherlock. Sherlock absent-mindedly walked back towards the window, his hands behind his back. Oh, he said softly, speaking more to himself than anybody else in the room, except perhaps Amelia. Elegant. Elegant? John said in disbelief. But what was the point? Lestrade insisted, being the detective that he was. Why would anyone do this? Sherlock remained silent for the smallest moment, his eyes briefly flicking to Amelia, who was currently looking down at her lap. Oh, I can't be the only person in the world that gets bored. His thoughts drifted to the thoughts of shooting the wall, and Amelia throwing books at the same place. A smile briefly made its way onto his pale, thin lips, but a quick alert from the pink phone snapped him back to focus. He unlocked the phone, John sending him a quizzical glance. You have one new message, said the phone, alerting the group. Amelia frowned as they listened to the message. 4 pips. First test passed, it would seem, Sherlock said. Here's the second. He held the phone out for Amelia, John and Lestrade to see, though John noticed the way the phone screen directly faced Amelia, and Amelia alone. The youngest Watson frowned, oblivious to this fact, as she took a closer look of the car in the photo. The car doors were open, the number plates visible enough to read. It's abandoned, wouldn't you say? Amelia said, arching her eyebrow at Sherlock. I'll see if it's been reported, Lestrade said, picking up his desk's phone to investigate the strange car. Freak, Donovan said as she walked into Lestrade's office holding the phone. It's for you. No one but Sherlock noticed the way Amelia stiffened visibly, clutching her fist to keep her emotions under control. Puzzled over Amelia's reaction, Sherlock took the phone from Donovan and walked out of the small office with the phone pressed to his ear. Hello, Sherlock said uncertainly. It's okay that you've gone to the police, a young man said, sobbing uncontrollably. Who is this? Sherlock demanded. Is this you again? But don't rely on them, the young man continued on, ignoring Sherlock's questions. Especially not our precious little Amy. She'll only break your heart. Out of the corner of his eye, Sherlock saw Amelia tap her fingers against her knee, playing a silent melody no one could hear. Clever you, guessing about Carl Powers, the man's voice cracked, bringing Sherlock back to focus. I never liked him. Sherlock's eyes widened in slight confusion, his genius mind already racing through dozens of possibilities as to the connection the caller and Carl Powers could have had. Carl laughed at me, so I stopped him laughing, the man said as Amelia came out of the office, gazing at Sherlock in concern. And you've stolen another voice, I presume, Sherlock said into the phone, willingly letting Amelia take his hand and lace it through hers. This is about you and me. Well, and Amelia, of course, the man on the phone said, the loud sound of a bus passing by momentarily disrupting him. Who are you? Sherlock said as more traffic went past. What's that noise? The sound of life, Sherlock. The man took in a deep breath, trying to calm himself and to stop his futile tears. But don't worry, I can soon fix that. Maybe I should start with Amelia next time. Don't you dare lay a finger on her, Sherlock hissed. Kill innocents, kill me, whatever pleases you, because you'll eventually get caught. But don't you ever try to lay a finger on my Amelia. Amelia blinked a few times, taken aback by Sherlock's threat and by the fact that he had called her his. However, a warm feeling flooded her heart, and blood blush slowly painted her cheeks pink. You solved my last puzzle in 9 hours, the man said shakily. This time you have 8. The line suddenly went dead. The dialer tone filled the empty silence. Sherlock lowered the phone, Amelia meeting his horrified gaze just as Lestrade came out of his office. Lestrade cleared his throat, furrowing his eyebrows at the MI6 agent and the consulting detective. We found it, he announced. Sherlock wrapped his arm around Amelia's shoulders. Then what are we waiting for? At the crime scene. Amelia's sharp eyes picked up the crime scene by the river where the car was found. She definitely stepped to the side as several people in forensics walked past her, presumably to examine the car. Lestrade waved Sherlock, John, and Amelia forward. The car was hired yesterday morning by an Ian Monkford, Lestrade informed, flipping through some notes. Banker of some kind, city boy, paid in cash. Both Sherlock and Amelia eyes narrowed as they passed a distraught woman talking with a policewoman. Told his wife he was going away on a business trip, but he never arrived, Lestrade continued. You're still hanging around him, Sally Dolivan said, catching Amelia before she went to inspect the car, along with John and Sherlock. Yeah, well, Amelia said uncertainly, shifting in the bell staff she'd stolen from Sherlock. Oh, how she was never going to give this back, nor was she about to give his scarf, which she tied around her neck, back either. Opposites attract, I suppose. No, we're not a couple, Amelia trailed off, her eyes briefly flickering to Sherlock's back. Amelia sighed, shaking her head and putting her hands in her pockets. You should get yourself a hobby. Stamps, maybe, Donovan suggested. Model trains, safer. She turned on her heel, walking over to Lestrade, while Sherlock leaned into the car, eyeing the blood on the seats. Before you ask, Lestrade said, yes, it's Monkford's blood. The DNA checks out. Amelia came up behind Sherlock, opening the glove box. She found a small business card and tucked it into her pocket, quickly closing the lid before Lestrade could see. She straightened. No body, she said. Not yet, said Donovan. Get a sample sent to the lab, Sherlock ordered. Lestrade nodding in response. Sherlock left, hurriedly walking to the woman he had seen earlier. Miss Monkford? Yes, the woman sobbed. Sorry, but I've already spoken with 3 policemen. No, we're not from the police. We're... John started. Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock cut him off. He gestured towards Amelia, my wife, and her brother. I'm a very old friend of your husband's. Sherlock looked down, voice cracking as he pretended to hold back tears. We grew up together. I'm sorry, who? I don't think he ever mentioned you. Oh, he must have done, Sherlock said insistently, a few fake tears welling in his eyes. This is horrible. This isn't it. Isn't it? Amelia turned to John, making him face the other way, as she recognized John would not be able to keep his face neutral. Once she had given a nod to Sherlock, the detective continued on. I just can't believe it. I only saw him the other day. Same old Ian, not a care in the world, Sherlock smiled weakly. Sorry, Mrs. Monkford said in disbelief. But my husband has been depressed for months. Who are you? Really strange that he hired a car, Amelia piped in. Why would he do that? It's a bit suspicious, isn't it? No, it isn't, Miss Monkford said. He forgot to renew the tax on the car, that's all. Oh, well, that was Ian, Sherlock said, sounding amused. That was Ian all over. No, it wasn't, Miss Monkford protested. Wasn't it? Sherlock asked, dropping his fake persona. Interesting. He turned and walked away, grabbing Amelia's hand and leading her away, with John quickly following. Why did you lie to her? John asked as he, Amelia, and Sherlock ducked under the yellow police tape, quickly fleeing the scene. People don't like telling you things, but they love to contradict you, Amelia said as Sherlock looked at her, waiting for her to explain. She smiled at this, looking at John. Past tense. Did you notice? Sorry. What? John blinked. I referred to her husband in the past tense, Sherlock said. She joined in. Bit premature. They've only just found the car. You think she murdered her husband? John asked. Definitely not, Amelia shook her head. That's not a mistake a murder would make. I see. John paused, tilting his head to the side momentarily. No, I don't. What am I seeing? Fishing, Donovan said as Amelia passed her. Try fishing. Amelia stopped in her tracks. Oh my God, she muttered, but turned to face Donovan with a wide and utterly fake smile on her face. She gave Donovan a sharp, exasperated nod before quickly rushing after Sherlock. Where now? John questioned. Janice Carr's, Amelia said, handing the business card she had found to John. Just found this in the glove compartment. Sherlock cocked an eyebrow at her. See? I can be clever, too. Sherlock smiled. I never doubted you. Not even for a moment. Chapter 12. Impressing Sherlock. Amelia bit her lip, scrutinizing Edward, as identified by the nameplate on his desk, carefully. His office was well kept. She noticed, but by the tan line on his wrist, she could tell that he often spent time abroad. Amelia cocked her head quizzingly as Sherlock shot her a look, wondering what was going through the consulting detective's mind. Can't see how I can help you, gentlemen, Edward said to Sherlock and John. Those eyes were on Amelia. She sifted uncomfortably under his gaze, leaning into Sherlock's side. And lady. Amelia ignored him entirely. Mr. Monkford hired a car from you yesterday. Yeah, Edward confirmed. Lovely motor. Mazda RX-8. Wouldn't mind one of them myself. Sherlock slowly walked around Edward's desk, quite aware that Edward wasn't talking about the car when he said he wanted one. Sherlock involuntarily pursed his lips at the thought, feeling protective over the youngest Watson. He came to a stop beside Edward. Is that one? Sherlock asked, pointing to a picture on the wall at random. No, they're all Jags, Edward answered, turning to face him. Yeah, I can see you're not a car man, eh? But, Amelia said, breaking the awkward silence. Surely you can afford one. A Mazda, I mean. Yeah, it's a fair point, Edward said, but you know how it is. It's like working in a sweatshop. Once you start picking up the liquorious all sorts, when does it all stop, eh? He eyed Amelia hungry as he scratched his arm, causing her to shoot him an angry glare. But you didn't know Mr. Monkford, said John. No, he was just a client, Edward said, came in here and hired one of my cars. No idea what happened to him, poor sod. Amelia stood abruptly, preaching on the edge of Edward's desk, much to Sherlock's amusement. Sherlock knew that Mycroft often taught his protégés more unconventional means of persuasion. He just didn't think he'd ever see Amelia in action. Amelia smiled seductively, looking at Edward from under her lashes. Nice holiday, Mr. Edward? She asked in a low voice. Eh? You've been away, Amelia continued, despite John's appalled look. Haven't you? Oh, Edward stuttered, surprised by the turns of events. He gestured to his face. No, it's, sunbeds, I'm afraid. Yeah, too busy to get away. My wife wouldn't love it, though. Bit of sun. Have you got any change for the cigarette machine? Sherlock asked suddenly. What? Edward blinked. Well, I noticed one on the way in, and I haven't gotten any change, Sherlock shrugged, handing Edward a 20-pound note. I'm gasping. Well, Edward took out his wallet, thumbing through several Colombians, which Sherlock and Amelia noticed immediately. No, sorry. Oh, well, Sherlock said, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Edward. He turned and headed for the door. You've been very helpful. Come on, John. I've got change if you still want to, John sputtered as he followed Sherlock and Amelia out of Edward's office. He seemed to be doing that a lot lately, he noticed. Edward patted his upper left arm. Nicotine patches, remember? I'm doing well. So what was that all about? John said in confusion. He needed to look inside his wallet, Amelia muttered, her head hanging low and her hair creating a curtain which covered part of her face. Why? Sherlock looked at Amelia and smiled, knowing that she had figured it out even before he had. Mr. Edwards, a liar. St. Bard's Lab. Amelia wondered what Sherlock was doing as she eyed the large drop of blood in a glass dish. Chemistry had never been her forte, nor had English lit, nor maths, for that matter. Sherlock straightened as he combined the blood with a single drop of unidentified fluid. The pink phone rang, causing Amelia to sigh as Sherlock took it out of his pocket. The caller ID, once again, reading blocked. He answered it with a small frown. Hello? The clue's in the name, the young man from earlier said, his voice cracking as he sobbed. Janice Cars. Why would you be giving me a clue? Sherlock said quizzingly, arching his eyebrow. Why does anyone do anything? The man said, answering his question with another question. Because I'm bored. But we were made for each other, Sherlock. Then talk to me in your own voice. Patience. Sherlock rolled his eyes slightly as the line went dead. He stared into the distance, making Amelia wonder what he was thinking about. She clapped her hands twice, then pointed down at the petri dish. Sherlock blinked twice, startled, then looked down at the dish. I'm no chemist, Amelia started, but I think that's a good sign. Sherlock smiled in response. Police car pound. Amelia pursed her lips as she, Sherlock, John, and Lestrade stood around Ian Monkford's car. Amelia tapped Sherlock's shoulder as her phone alerted her, signifying that there was 3 hours left. She cleared her throat and looked at John and Lestrade. How much blood on the seat, would you say? How much? Lestrade said, surprised by Amelia's odd question. About a pint. Not about exactly a pint, Amelia corrected. That was their first mistake. The blood's definitely Ian Monkford's, but it's been frozen. Frozen? Lestrade turned to John with wide eyes, thinking that Amelia had gone loopy. There are clear signs, Sherlock continued. I think Ian Monkford had a pint of his blood some time ago. I think Ian Monkford gave a pint of his blood some time ago, and that's what they spread on the sheets. Who did? John asked. Janice Cars, Sherlock answered. The clue's in the name. The god with 2 faces, John realized. Exactly. Amelia shot a rare smile at her brother, leaning into Sherlock's shoulder. They provide a very special service, said Sherlock. If you've got any kind of problem, money troubles, bad marriage, whatever, Amelia interrupted, wincing as Sherlock glared at her. Sorry. Janice Cars will help you disappear, Sherlock continued. Ian Monkford was up to his eyes in some kind of trouble. Financial, at a guess. He's a banker. Couldn't see a way out. But if he were to vanish, if the car he hired was found, abandoned with his blood all over the driver's seat. So where is he? John raised his eyebrow. Columbia, Sherlock said as he closed the car door. Columbia, Lestrade said, sounding surprised. Mr. Edward of Janice Cars has 20,000 had a 20,000 Colombian peso note in his wallet, Amelia said calmly. Quite a bit of change, too. He told us he hadn't been abroad recently, but when Sherlock asked him about the cars, we could see his tan line clearly. No one wears a shirt on a sunbed, Sherlock approved Amelia's deductions with a nod. That, plus his arm. His arm? Lestrade asked in confusion. Kept scratching it, Amelia shrugged, obviously irritating him and bleeding. Why? Because he'd recently had a booster jab. Hep B, probably. Difficult to tell at that distance. Conclusion? He'd just come back from settling Ian Monkford into his new life in Colombia. Mrs. Monkford cashes in on the life insurance, and she splits it with Janice Cars. Mrs. Monkford? John stuttered. You seem to be developing a stutter. You okay? Amelia said in concern. Oh, yes, Sherlock said to Lestrade, trying not to smile at Amelia's remark. She's in on it, too. Now go and arrest them, Inspector. That's what you do best. He turned to Amelia. We need to let our friendly bomber know that this case is solved. We need to let our friendly bomber know the case is solved. He turned on his heel, leading John and Amelia away. Lestrade blinked repeatedly, amazed by the sheer amount of information Amelia and Sherlock had deducted. Sherlock clenched his fist, grinning like a madman. I am on fire. If you say I am death, I'm going to hurt someone, Amelia said as she hailed the cab, waiting impatiently for Sherlock and John to join her. They both stood outside the cab, bickering over who would sit next to Amelia. You two are hopeless, Amelia sighed, grabbing the hem of Sherlock's coat and dragging him in. Sherlock stumbled, his head hitting the top of the car's frame. Ouch, he mumbled, rubbing the spot the car had hit. The cab shook as John slid in, slamming the door behind him. As John rattled off the address to 221B, Sherlock turned to Amelia. Your deductions back there were quite impressive. Yes, well, I learned from the best, Amelia said, rolling her eyes, as Sherlock smiled mugly. It's too bad you weren't there that day. Damn, John laughed, smirking at Sherlock's astounded look. Amelia lightly punched Sherlock's shoulder as she got out of the cab. She skipped across Baker Street, not bothering to look for incoming cars. She unlocked the flat, running up the stairs to the living room. She shivered, wishing that someone had fixed the heating after the supposed gas leak. She tossed John's laptop to Sherlock, already having typed in John's password. Does everyone know my password? John grumbled. 221B is not a very secure password, John. Amelia shook her head at her brother's naivety. Yeah. Sherlock smirked, sitting on his usual seat. He typed in the URL to the science of deduction. Amelia carefully watched his every move. His nimble fingers quickly typed a message, showing it to Amelia for approval. Congratulations to Ian Monkford on his relocation to Columbia. Amelia shrugged indifferently. It'll get the message across, I suppose. Sherlock sighed. Would you like to add something? Once she shook her head, he sent the message. Amelia jumped as the pink phone rang. She hurriedly picked it up before Sherlock could, answering the call. He says you can come and fetch me, the man sobbed. Help me, please. Of course, Amelia said softly. Just tell us where you are, okay? Amelia, the man said. Amelia froze, nearly dropping the phone. How do you know my name? How did you know it was me? She demanded fiercely, clutching her fists. I can never forget your sweet, sweet voice, Amy dear, the man replied, crying. This is between you and me. Why do you always insist on bringing others into this? Amelia said quietly, ignoring Sherlock and John as she went to the bedroom and slammed the door shut, making sure to lock it. I don't think your dear boyfriend is complaining. Actually, I believe he is enjoying this. Why does everyone think he's my boyfriend? Amelia let out a deep breath, her nostrils flaring. Why are you so fascinated with me anyways? I'm not anything special. We both know that's not true. Fine, whatever, I give up. I'm done with your stupid little game, Amelia said in exasperation. There was a pause and a small interruption of static. If you give up now, you and all your friends will die, Jim Morty's real voice said, the tone sickly sweet. My next puzzle will come soon, Amelia. I hope you're ready for it. Oh, and to answer your question, the man you're looking for is at Piccadilly Circus. I'll see you soon. James, Amelia started, only to have the line go dead. Damn it, she roared, holding her head in her hands. She looked up as a knock sounded on the bedroom door. Go away, John. It's Sherlock. Then go away, Sherlock, she mumbled. You have the phone, he said simply. And you're also in my room. Is there a point here? I should be allowed in whenever I want, Amelia, Sherlock said, walking into the bedroom with a cup of tea on a saucer. He chuckled as Amelia let out a loud groan, hiding her face in a pillow. Sherlock tossed his coat to the side, laying down on the bed. Amelia snuggled into his chest, her hair tickling Sherlock's nose. Sherlock stiffened, unused to this affection. He wrapped an arm around Amelia's waist, pulling her closer. He took in a deep breath, inhaling the sweet scent of Amelia's jasmine perfume. Eventually, her breathing grew labored and quiet. Her eyelids fluttering closed. Sherlock remained there, unsure of what to do. Sherlock, Amelia mumbled, her voice gargly with sleep. Yes, Sherlock said in confusion, thinking that she was awake. Amelia remained silent for a long moment. Sherlock, she said again. It was then that Sherlock realized she had been saying his name in her sleep. He brushed her hair away from her face, fascinated by this thought. Sherlock smiled softly, leaning into the mattress as, for the first time in a long while, he fell asleep.